everybody. This is Nanu Pagan
Hi.
and Jo Maldonado, and today we are continuing our interviews with witches. Today is the very last day and the very last interview with witches, and it kind of puts me on the spot, so I called it the Notawitch Witch. So, how does that
Not a
sound,
witch.
Nanu? Does that sound like a Notawitch
That's perfect. That's perfect because you know what? Labels are something that you got to look at, you know?
Yes.
So yes, and that's really cool. Not a witch. When I saw that you posted that, it's exactly what we are, right?
No, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I think one of the things that always took me aback and is the label of witch. Labels are, they're very dangerous things, I think. Words have energy and power. And I think the term witch has from its origins way back 14th century, 13th century, black, even back beyond that. I think it's just got a really bad rap name. You think of a witch as an evil person, and even the caricatures, of an old lady riding a broom with massive amounts of warts on her nose, the scraggly cat, over the full moon. It's like, it's just, and then thank goodness Samantha from Bewitched came along, you know?
She was the first pretty witch I ever saw.
Me too. And I'm
Oh my
like,
God, I used to love her mom and Dora.
yes, yes. And all that. And then I'm like, that's good. I'm so glad that was my favorite show. And then of course right after that came I Dream of Jeannie. But
Yes.
I think, the concept of magic tied into these women that were like your everyday looking, housewives and moms and, you know, I think that was very unique for back then, for the writers of those shows to bring forward something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, if we look at our history, right,
Hmm.
coming from an indigenous perspective, I can
Hmm.
tell you about colonization.
Yeah.
And when you look at our history, the other has always been demonized.
Yes.
And, when it comes to witches, while we know the witches on the broom and the witches that actually did healing work,
Yes.
this term was also used to overpower and oppress. I mean, look
Yeah.
at what happened in the Salem witch trials.
Awful. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People just use the label to, overpower someone else one way or another.
Yeah. And how many
It's
people went
nice
into
that we're
hiding?
reclaiming it.
How many people went into hiding because they were persecuted as being a witch, and think back to the Druids, and even, all those people that kind of stepped into their own magical abilities, you know, they were oh, whoops, I think someone's trying to get on and I'm not able to see. There we go. Okay. I think all these people finally just stepped into the magic that was within them, and a lot of other people didn't. And then all of a sudden, well, they're different. They can, heal people with, some chamomile, make them go to sleep with chamomile. Oh my gosh, that's a
Right.
witch. What are they doing? They were just so misunderstood and misread. And I think that's kind of the way, I felt for a while. And my mother even, I would have dreams of predicting things, or I could see things that other people couldn't. And then I think my mother, just really took offense to that. And she was like on the bandwagon of persecution. It's just like, you're a witch. Don't do that. Don't say that. And then you have this entire generation and generation of children that are so gifted, all the light children. And you have this whole population of adults that are, stifling them. You don't have an imaginary friend. You don't see
The
anybody.
best way of overpowering a whole society is by um, ensuring that they overpower themselves, right? So there is this um, inherited belief of that other that the witch is. And
Mhm.
it's interesting that you mentioned the Druids because they were considered witches.
Yes.
And when you look at each and every community that had these healing people or these people that spoke to spirits,
Mm-hmm.
they each had their own term. Like
Mm-hmm.
for my people, it was beike. But for the people that came from Europe, we
Mm.
were witches. You
Yes.
see?
Yeah.
So that kind of transpersed all over the place. I
Yeah.
mean, to those who practice ancient African belief systems.
Yeah.
And it kind of expanded not only into the healing realms, but even just different religious belief
Yes.
systems
Yes.
and deities,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But you
Absolutely.
know what? I would like to know,
Yeah.
because I've known you for years,
Years.
right?
Yes.
And I've seen you grow because we've been together that long,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
And we've seen each other's growth. I know that
Yes.
you've mentioned it to me.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but I remember years and years ago, you had a little trouble accepting that term witch. And I
Yeah.
remember that I had called you a witch sometime. I think it was the day we met. We met in Panera
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Heidi.
Yeah.
Heidi is the one that introduced us.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
she turned around, she says, "Oh, yeah, but she doesn't know who she is." I
Yeah.
remember her telling me that.
She said that.
So when I turned around, we were talking. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, we were talking about shamanic beliefs
Mhm.
and Buryat beliefs and Taino
Yeah.
beliefs. And I said, well, witches come from Europe and
Yeah.
you're a witch, right?
Yeah.
And you just gave me a look.
Yeah.
So my question is, how did you find your magic? Because I know that accepting the label, whatever that label may be, and finding your magic doesn't happen always at the same time. Usually, at least for me, I always had the magic,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
but the label was really difficult to
Yeah.
like. I didn't want labels. Even today, I don't
Yeah.
want labels.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my question is, when did you find your magic? And and then from
So you
there
think I
on
found it,
to,
huh? Is that what you're?
I know you found it, but when did you find it? And when did you finally accept your label?
Okay, so I'm still an anti-label it. I,
You know which, right?
it's yeah, I'm not a witch, and it's not and it's not necessarily witch, but it's witch, it's shaman, it's mother, it's wife. I just don't like the some of the affiliations, the labels, the attachments that people put onto words. That's why I'm an anti-label it. Yeah, I don't
I
like to
understand that
label
completely.
it. I made that up. I don't know if it's a real word or not. But it's like it's kind of I believe in energy and everything that is energetic. Words have energy in someone. It's kind of like when I would do a lecture with another colleague of mine that was a dog trainer. Together we would travel and we would do these presentations, and I would talk about imprinting your mind. And what you say actually gets absorbed into your body.
That's right. You did start. I mean, when I met
That's how
you,
I
you were doing
started
the energy work with the
with the
animals.
animals, and he
Yeah.
would go off and explain how it relates to everything that we do and how dogs pick it up. That this is like when you move a certain way. I'm not even aware of it, but like you know if I was to do that, I'd be flinching because I'm reacting to something. So I'm getting so off track, but I know where there's a point in there somewhere. So when I found my magic, I think it's slowly paying attention, one tiny little thing at a time, and then putting it together. And my biggest tool was keeping journals, because I wrote everything down in my journals.
Yeah.
And if today I went out and I worked with my colleague and we worked on a dog and we talked
Write it
about
all down.
how human language affects dogs, and we folded our arms, and when we folded our arms, that is a sign of authority or power, and the dogs would all of a sudden listen to, like red zone dogs would start listening to what we were saying. And I began to write it down. I think when you write things down and then you go back, and that could be a week later, month later, a year later, whatever, and you go back to your notes, you recognize the pattern.
Yes, that is why I love the Book of Shadows, the
Yes,
grimoire. I
yes,
mean, the notebooks, the journals, whatever you call
yes,
it.
yes,
I love it that you were keeping them and you
yes,
were going back to them.
yes,
They
yes.
become your teachers, don't they? This
They
is so
sure, you do.
awesome.
And you don't realize this. Like, something happens today and I keep a note and I write it down. No big deal. Then you know what? About a month later, something very similar happens again. And no big deal, but you write it down. But by the third time you go, wait, didn't this happen already? And you go
Yeah,
back
you
to your
start seeing the
notes
patterns. Oh my
and
God.
there's your pattern, and I think that is very magical. So for those that know me, they know that I have a lot of energy, and it's how did I find my magic in my energy? So energy, I mean physically zapping things. And you
Yeah.
all know that are listening that do know me, everything from air conditioning units to car batteries to I mean, I'm way beyond the printer and the coffee pot. That's nothing to me. Or if I wave my hands and someone asks me about energy and we're having a cup of coffee at a restaurant, boom, the whole side goes out. All the lights and all the power goes out on one side, and then
Oh,
I get
girl, you got to harness that stuff in,
right.
man.
But this took so many times of this happening over and over before I went, oh, I get it. So if I do this, oh, that happens. But that was because I was keeping notes. And I realized, and studying Reiki and studying Qigong and studying energy healing, when I was studying all that, that's when my energy, my hands became activated. So I noticed I did a lot of pro bono work with animals. If I was to go out to a horse farm and I feel it projecting now. Better watch where I'm pointing. And I
Exactly.
would just point my hands at the horses, because that's what you do in Reiki and Qigong. You muster up your energy, and then you project it out. And
Right.
the horses started collapsing like onto the ground, one by one. I mean, I'd have the whole friggin' pasture down. And I'd go, did I do that? And then I turn around and I do it in another pasture, and boom, those horses with saddles that had riders getting on them would go to the ground.
No way.
So, and I remember when I went to this one particular horse farm, and that was happening, and at this point, I was out there a few times already, and they were watching me do this. And I remember the owner of the farm just saying, it's just Joe. They're relaxing. Let them relax. Nobody mount any horses. We're not going on the trail ride
Oh,
yet.
wow. That's really cool. So they took advantage of the fact that you were there to take care of
Well,
their
I
animals
was
too.
there to give them energy,
Yeah.
and it's like again, I don't have a specific purpose. I always say highest and best, better than I can imagine.
Yeah.
Hey, that's easy, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know what the universe has planned for that particular horse, but there you go. And now it's like, hey, I feel pretty good. So I think that's magic. It's a lot of the stuff that talents that we have. We have someone put a note in the chat window, and please feel free to ask questions in the chat window if you have any questions, or we'll address them afterwards. But this is this is so easy once you know what to do. And what to do is just keep track of everything that you're doing, so that you know that what your
Okay, so
magic
then my
is.
next question is this.
Yeah.
When did your journals then actually become grimoires? I guess, hold on. When did you actually, because I know for me, it was also a process of going through labels. I wasn't sure. It
Yeah.
was almost like going to the store and checking out blouses
Yeah. Yeah.
and seeing how they fit.
Yeah.
None of these labels really fit.
No.
So how was your process of the labels? When did you realize that those labels weren't as important as your service to the world?
Yeah, and I think I still kind of have a problem with labels. I still do. Like I said, I'm an anti-label it. And I think It's even the term when you mention grimoire or book of shadows, you know,
Yeah.
it's like, oh God, I don't know what that is, but Book of Shadows. It sounds very
Sounds
evil.
scary.
It
Yeah.
sounds, yeah, it sounds
That's
scary.
why I call my books notebooks. They're just my
Well,
notebooks.
and I call them journals.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's what they are. They're they're notebooks, they're calendar books with empty pages. It's like whatever I have, and that's kind of how I started. My husband had a whole bunch of these calendars. He was going to throw them out. I'm like, wait, I'm going to start writing in them. But
Absolutely.
the other part of magic also happened when I was doing that grimoire, Book of Shadows, whatever,
Mhm.
is that I developed automatic writing.
I remember about that. Yeah.
Yes, and I didn't know what it actually was. Again, I know what the label or the term was.
Hmm.
All I knew was I would think a question, and my hand was connected to something out there, and it would start writing in a different dialect. Do you hear the dogs barking very badly?
Not very badly. You still come through.
Oh, okay, because I hear them and I can. Let me just go for 1 second. Nanu, can you sing a song? And I'll be right back. I'll let me just make sure they're quiet.
Well, I will stick with the idea of the labels because to me, I'm all about boundaries and perspectives. And and a label really kind of puts you in a box. Um, I, for myself, when it came to magic and it came to label, today I don't call it magic. I call it my spirituality. It's my practices. It's what I do. And I follow what I've been taught. I follow what I feel works
Okay.
right and resonates. So when it comes to labels for myself, I usually just kind of fly with the person that I'm speaking with, because sometimes they'll understand which, and then I can bring them back to my definition of how I define myself.
Yes.
Another person might understand shaman better. And so I'll use that label with them, and then
Yeah.
I'll bring them right back to
Yeah.
the way I define myself,
Yeah.
Beike.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of wanted to go with you. What do you do with your labels? I know you talked about Hearth Witch, you've talked about White Witch and Black Witch,
Yeah.
which those are terms that I got that icky wicky feeling as
Yeah.
you should,
Yeah. That's
right?
icky. That's icky mucky.
Yeah,
But
I don't like
so
those
I did. I mentioned a
definitions.
couple things in the copy for today, and so one of them is white witch versus dark or black witch. So white witch, if I'm going to use the label of witch, and I come out of the closet because it's October, in
Yeah,
October, everybody wants to be a witch in October,
yeah,
and I'm like, there's so many, and I know that we've had interviews with you yourself actually, and a few other gals, and they just, hey, I'm a witch, and I've always been a witch, and it's no big deal. And I think coming from that very strict European upbringing and having my mother curse at me every time I would do something that was different,
yeah.
I think that always just kind of resonates and sits behind me. So I came up, I didn't invent the term white witch. I just, if you're going to call me a witch, white witch is good. White is good. It's like Glenda, the good witch, and the Wizard of Oz. She saves the Munchkins. She gets Dorothy off in the
True.
balloon with Toto. So
True. One of the things that I really don't dig about the White Witch and the Black Witch, I get what you're saying, but when it comes to that, it almost kind of shows a good and evil kind of thing. And,
yes,
life is just not that black and
it
white.
isn't. Mhm.
Sometimes a White Witch will do things that are not acceptable because it needs to be done. And
Yes,
sometimes someone who does, heavy energy work will go ahead and do something positive because it needs to be done,
yes,
right?
yes.
So, but when it comes to your own, I know you don't label yourself, but your process, because I do remember you like trying on a couple of shirts. I
I think
do remember
everybody
that.
has to try on some shirts to see what resonates with them.
Exactly.
It's building your
So,
toolbox, is what I always say. It's like,
yes, you
you
do.
like the journey in shamanism. Well, that's so similar to meditation, but it's really not. There's a little bit
Yeah,
more. So,
yeah.
and I think we all need to, feel free enough and open enough to try things that resonate with you. And you build your intuition that way. That's if it
Yeah.
feels good, you did the right thing. That's good then. I don't have a problem in doing automatic writing. I talk to dead people, and have been a lot. How did that start? I was a publicist for a medium in the town of
Oh,
Casadega.
wow.
And I did that for 3 years with her. I got her on TV. She did all this kind of stuff. And what happened? I sat in on every class that she taught, and all of a sudden, I'm doing what she was doing, and it's just like that. It's not a scary thing. If you have coffee with me and we go to Boston's for a cup of coffee, if you say, and then my mother said, and bam, there she is. Of course, my mother is dead, but there she is. And it comes so quickly. And that's why I don't have a problem in talking to animals that have passed as well as people, or like tomorrow night. Hey, I hope everybody signed up for the seance because it's fun. I feel like, you know, when you use the term medium, that's another label, right? But
Another
for
label, yeah.
me, medium is, a vehicle or a manner of communicating from that ether to this ether. And I think that's part of what we do. So White Witch does good things in my mind. And
Yeah.
it's all about what you think in your mind. So Hearth Witch for the home. Do I do things for the home? Oh yeah. I always, I sprinkle stuff. I say my words. I sow my seeds. I talk to my plants. I grow herbs. I drink the herbs I grow, or
Right.
or I burn them, or whatever. It's so Hearth Witch, Kitchen Witch. It's as I'm cooking and I'm stirring. So all prayers, good intentions. I want the
Blessings,
stew to be,
absolutely.
it's so Kitchen Witch. So I think I googled it. I looked it up, and I put in how many types of witches are there. Holy cow! Well, there's even an angel witch. I mean, there's so many different types of witches. So
As
I think,
many types as there are witches, would you
yeah,
think?
yeah. So you want to be a computer witch? Go for it. Or
There you go.
a tea witch.
There you
There's
go.
you can call yourself whatever you want, but it's what resonates with you. And I think that's why I just I'm like, okay, fine, label. And I've had so many witches say, you're a kitchen witch, or you're a this witch, or you're a that, and I'm like, okay,
Whatever you need,
whatever you
exactly.
think I am.
I
I
am here
know
to serve,
I
whatever you
am.
need.
Right, and I'm here to be of service. And
I
that's
have a question about tomorrow.
yes.
Okay. Um, a lot of us have sat with you before, and we've talked about these before, and we've had seances before where you've been a conduit. But for those who may not have had that experience, what are the expectations then for tomorrow?
So tomorrow it's a one question seance. So it's first come first serve, and that is first come to Zoom and first come from the other world. So some of them are really pushy, and they will stand in line and they will do stuff that I don't always like. Like if sometimes, like if I have a pen and I'm writing, and if I have a spirit that's getting very impatient and wants to be heard to their person, my hands will go crazy and it'll just until
Oh,
I address that spirit, or I'll send it away. And I don't want to send it away because it's there to communicate with the loved one. So and that's what it is. So it's basically you sign on. Everybody has their portal access, and as soon as you will enter the room, type in the chat window who you want to communicate with and what is your question, and we'll just address it in the questions that are
that's
listed.
a really good
Yeah.
that's a really good process.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
That's
whoever's in there,
cool.
and it's like we have 45 minutes, so we can answer a lot of questions and a lot of spirits, and some people will have a second or third round if they want, with another spirit if they want, and also too, if your intention is, for example, to communicate with your uncle, it doesn't mean he's going to come through. You know, it's that
Yeah,
there's no
that's a
guarantee that,
good point to make. Yeah.
yeah, because there's no
You
guarantee.
may want to call them, they may be ghosting you, you know?
I like that. So, you know, that's just something to keep in mind. There may be somebody there, and it might be somebody maybe you didn't expect to hear from, but there is someone that's going to be here. And we have two guardians. You will be on, you know, you'll be kind of moderating. But there's also two guardians that are at the seance always. I have one, you know, my angel witch. She's there with all her battalions of angels. So she will be on with her angels to make sure that, you know, we have all the right kind of spirits and people there. And then we have, you know, badass kicker person on the other side to make sure that nothing bad comes in, you know. So we'll have, you know, both worlds. And I just, you know, whoever comes, whoever talks, you know, it's a reunion. It's actually, it should be called a reunion than a seance, because that's what it is.
That's true, because I was going to actually come back to that. Seance is just another label.
Yeah,
So,
it is.
what, well, where did you adopt that label from?
Well,
You know what I mean? Why why that label? Because then that label really kind of resonates with that demonic kind of othering
yeah.
that's been historically put down. So how did you come to accept this word seance? Because it does have a lot of really scary connotations.
So, as the public relations person for the town of Casadega for many years,
Okay,
one
okay, I
one of
see
the
it.
things, one of my jobs, you know, we had so many TV shows that, you know, and tapings, and everybody wants to sit in on a seance. So one
Uh,
of my jobs was, that I saw it as my job, was to protect the town's integrity, you know, because reporters will run wild with the story and create
yeah, I
all
can
their own little
imagine.
stuff. So I sat in, you know, in so many seances. And I suppose that the term seance doesn't really bother me because I'm used to it because of that.
Gotcha,
Yeah, so I
gotcha.
think that's what that is. But I do have a problem with the label conduit. You use the word conduit, and I'm like, well, I'm not really a conduit. I'm more of an interpreter. You know, it's like, you know,
You
telephone
know
line.
what? We all kind of work differently, you know, depending on what I'm doing. I could be like a jumper cable, right?
Yes,
Where I'm kind of in the middle. Sometimes I consider myself a hollow log, you know, like a straw
yeah,
that things go through and that way. So yeah, it really depends. And yeah,
yeah.
labels are kind of limiting.
They are, and that's kind of why, you know, I'll go with witch. Okay, I'll go with shaman. Okay, I'll go with medium. Okay, that's fine. You know, what else? You know, I'll go with secretary. You know, but
Call me whatever, just don't call me late for dinner.
yeah, but one thing I do love, one label that I love, is being headmaster of the school. You know, and that's why, you know, the school is created, so that people can choose what area they resonate with, what they want to, you know, study. And yeah, I can't teach everything because I'm not really gifted in anything. But you know, we're really very fortunate.
That's not very true. You are very gifted in a lot of ways, you know, that we don't all express these ways the same way doesn't mean that we don't have them, you know. But I am really happy that we have such a variety of people
Yeah,
that we work with.
yeah,
I am so happy because there's sometimes, I mean, there have been people who've come and gone,
yeah,
and there have been times that you and I have been pulling our hair, and I'm like, you know what, let's just do this, you and I,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that this is not about you and I. This is about building a community that support each other and then support those that are coming up
Yeah,
and give them a space to discover who they really are.
yeah,
And I really did that for myself. I mean, that's the only reason that I'm really here
yeah.
and doing this, because you
Yeah.
really think that same way.
Yeah, yeah. And on the note of witches, I just want to say thank God for Harry Potter, you know, Poor
That
JK.
was a fun one.
She went through, a whole bunch of crap, just being ostracized and condemned and banned from countries. But look what she did. She opened up the world of magic to so many people so quickly in her life. And I think I owe a lot of gratitude to that author, and I mean, our school was originally, it was based on the Harry Potter movies. And we went, wait a minute, all the stuff that's in the movies, we're all doing it. We just call it labels again. We call it different things,
Absolutely.
and I think that's kind of, where we are, where all that. I know our time is up, but I'd
Okay.
like to invite the people that are on this call to stay tuned, and we'd be happy to, answer your questions and talk a little bit more about witchy stuff and who's a witch and who's not a witch and
Just
what
hang out for a little bit, right?
we can hang out for a little bit. And everybody else that's listening to the recording, thank you so much for listening to Nanu and I today. And this concludes our 4 interviews of with witches for the month of October. But they're all available as a recording, each with very, very interesting facts. So I invite you to come to our YouTube channel. And I invite you to come to our seance. So on that note, thank you everybody so much. And Nanu, thank you for bearing with my dogs. And I'll see
Well,
y'all.
thank you for the coffee and the company.
Yes, absolutely. And tea for me too.